Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we're gonna make something really cool. We're gonna make some resin handles for utility blades. Where'd I get the inspiration from? You might know from this guy right here. I wanna thank Total Boat for helping me with this project as well. Thanks Jimmy for the inspiration. Let's get this done, see how we did it. Let's go. All right, we're gonna get this project started by making the molds for these handles. Now, I hit the camera there. That's a great start to this video. We're gonna take some strips on the crosscut sled with some 1/4-inch Baltic birch plywood. I'm then gonna cut this up into various lengths, giving me the pieces I need to make these molds. But I realized that, well, I can make things a lot easier on myself if... So I just cut a bunch of pieces and I was gonna wrap them up with the Tyvek, and honestly, it was gonna be such a pain. I figured, you know what? Let's just coat an entire piece with the stuff and then cut the mold. So yeah, live and learn. All right, back to the table saw to cut these pieces to length. I'm cutting these molds a little bit different than I did initially because I thought the molds were a little bit too big to make these handles. These pieces are cut to just the right size, and they're gonna afford me to make 2 different size handles depending on how I assemble them. This is the first way. I simply assemble basically these pieces in, well, a matter of fact, it's gonna kind of make a square. You can see here, just a little bit of CA glue and activator is all I need to put these together because I'm gonna seal this up with Tyvek tape around the outside as well. This process goes really quickly, and this mold here is a much thinner handle, giving me a much thinner profile on the finished product. Setting up a quick stop block on the crosscut sled, we're gonna cut these to length, making 3 even pieces. Gonna do the same thing on both style of handles. And then we're gonna go back to the workbench, start putting this whole thing together. All right, so what we have here are essentially some wooden tubes. They're open at both sides. I need to seal up one side, be at the bottom of the mold, and then I'm gonna use some Tyvek tape to kind of wrap everything up. I'm actually using the tape to seal the bottom as well. I was gonna put a piece of wood on the bottoms of these, but it's really not necessary. Enough tape here, you're gonna see, you're gonna have plenty of protection. Wrap this thing up, fold it just like a Christmas present, and you're good to go. This process is actually pretty fun, but you just gotta make sure you get all the edges sealed. That way you don't have any leaks. All right, now moving on to the apparatus I'm gonna make to hold the blade in place. Now, this one necessarily didn't need this piece. I'm basically putting in some Baltic birch, little pieces here to kind of give me an area to mount the blade. Now you're gonna see I shoved the blade down in there, and really it's a compression fit. It's not necessarily necessary to have that extra kind of cantilevered piece of plywood. That's just gonna allow me to put some CA glue and attach it. Now, the other molds, the ones that are extremely thin, definitely I need this because if not, well, the blade would just fall right through. Same principle applies. We're gonna cantilever the piece of wood out to the middle of the opening, just by eye. Again, this is one of those projects that I'm just throwing together because, well, I was inspired. If I told you in the beginning I was inspired by Jimmy, most definitely. And this was kind of a learning process for me as well. In the prototype, the razor blades did not act well with the resin because they're coated in oil, and I just didn't realize that. So a little denatured alcohol takes the oil right off, a little CA glue, and now we've got a razor blade that's right in the center, ready to pour some resin. Okay, now it's time to go ahead and dispense out some resin. I'm using Total Boat's 2-to-1 high performance ratio resin, and I'm also using their pump that dispenses both parts evenly and perfectly every time. Okay, full disclosure here, you might be wondering why this resin looks a little bit yellow. Well, resin does yellow over time, and I happen to be out of my hardener. However, in my old shop, I found a bottle of this stuff that is probably about 3 years old. And you know what? I figured I'd go ahead and put it in the pump and try it out. It does have a little bit of a yellow color. However, that's just cosmetic. And since I'm changing the color with some pigments, not a big deal. I will rest assured you guys, if you do have resin that's been sitting for a while, it will discolor on you just a little bit, but not a big deal for its structural integrity. It still acts the same. You're just gonna have a little bit of a yellow tinge when it's poured in a big group like that or a big volume. However, if you do a skim coat or if you paint it on something, you'll never be able to tell. All right, that being said, We're gonna take some syringes here. These are oral syringes. You can get them from your local pharmacy and they will just give them to you in most cases. I'm sure you can find them on Amazon as well, but if you go up to your local pharmacy, ask them for them and they'll probably just hand you some over. All right, you can see here I'm doing 3 colors. I'm gonna do 2 of each styles, 1 color each, and then we've got the gold, the green apple, and the blue turquoise. Really good looking colors here, I think. And you see that mold there behind me? Well, I like to keep these molds. These are actually cooking molds or baking molds, and they are super great. I'm not really sure where I got them. I think I got them at an antique store here in Jacksonville. Either way, they are super handy to have, and just if you have extra resin, you can just put things in there and see how they turn out. You can see there's some borders and some keys and some keyholes, fun stuff, good things for the kids to play with too, and figured I'd pay that forward too. It's been about 6 hours and the resin is fully cured. Now it's time to demold these things and see what we got. First step in the process is just to cut everything off. What I like to do is use a razor knife and cut the seams. Actually, this little cantilever thing is not coming off, except a little blow with a hammer worked out well. Then after I cut the seams, I take a few tools and I kind of pry everything off. And honestly, this process, well, I thought it would go faster than it did, and it was my own fault. I wasn't using the right technique. I don't need a chisel for this. I really didn't need to hammer and chisel these things out. And I'm gonna show you what I mean. So as this process keeps going forward, I'm thinking there's gotta be a better way to do this. And there is. Because if you don't orientate the chisel just right, this is what happens. You break it. The resin just broke from my failure. That was my fault. But luckily enough, I've still got the 2 pieces and I'm simply just gonna glue them back together. A little bit of CA glue. I'm gonna end up sanding all this down and then coating it with another coat of the 2-part resin as I kind of paint it on as a final coat. So really not that big a deal. But check this out. Here's the technique that I wish I had known that I'm sharing with you guys if you do something like this. So make your cuts, okay? Just score the edges of where the wood meets the wood, basically where the joints are. Then score the bottom and use the knife just to kind of pry it open. Check that out. I just kind of wiggle the knife in there and then just pry it off. Quite frankly, I should have been using this technique in the beginning, but I didn't know it. And it took me about 5 demoldings to figure this out. But hey, live and learn. So now it's time to shape these to really whatever you want. I'm gonna shape them to the contour of my hand on some of them. Some of them I'm gonna leave pretty much a basic shape. You don't have to use tools for this. You can just simply use some hand sanding and break all the edges and call it a day. But I'm using my disc sander and my spindle sander, and I'm gonna carve a few profiles in here. That should be pretty ergonomic, we'll see. Anyway, this is a pretty fun process too. It doesn't take very long at all. Moving things around. You can see here that I'm gonna kind of dig the resin into this. It's gonna really quickly put some finger holds. And it's just trial and error. Go back and forth, testing it, testing the grip. Pretty fun little process here. So in order to contour all sides of it, it's not recommended that you pick pieces up and introduce them to the spindle this way. However, if you got a good hold on it, you can see I've got the blade protected with multiple layers of blue tape as well. This is one of those techniques that I'm not gonna say you need to go do, but if you want to, be careful for sure. It worked out well for me. Definitely a cool little project coming together nicely. With the rough sanding complete, it's now time to take some 220 grit sandpaper and just hand sand all the edges, breaking everything, making sure everything is nice and smooth to the touch. To take the tape off, well, you can do it by hand, but I'm just gonna take a razor blade and cut it off. There's a little residual CA glue on these blades right there, but it's pretty simple just to kind of scrape it off, no big deal. Now, I'm trying to find a way to mount these where I can hang them upside down so I can paint or foam brush the last coat of resin onto these handles. And I figured this is probably the best way to do it. Stab them into a piece of plywood, use some squeeze clamps. These are pretty big squeeze clamps. And then, yeah, you guessed it, just turn it upside down, and there you go. And now I've mixed up another small batch of resin using a foam brush. I'm just gonna coat each and every piece on all sides with the resin, let it air dry, and these will be complete. Now that they're complete and dry, it's now time to just unpry them from the plywood, move everything out of the way. Let me give you a closer look at what we got. Here are the first 6 that you saw me make in those molds, and the 2 that you're gonna see me place here are the prototypes that I made before filming this video. And here you go. These turned out awesome. I wanna thank Jimmy for the inspiration, Total Boat for the resin. And quite frankly, Jimmy got a little bit of negative feedback on these. And for my final thoughts on that, wait till the end of the video, it's coming right up. All right, so now it's time to get them up out of the reach of children. And to do that, I've got this magnet strip in some plastic. If I only had something sharp to cut this open with, there we go. Pretty nice. Now, all kidding aside, I'm gonna show you this green one real quick. You guys remember the old Cutco knife company? I had some Cutco knives growing up that were like a mother of pearl, and they looked like that green one, now that I'm thinking about it. I really liked how these turned out. They feel good in the hand, fun project to do. Also, it's one of those projects that kind of helps you with your resin chops or your mold making chops as well. Now I'm simply just gonna take this magnet strip and just mount it to one French cleat, one simple piece of plywood that's cut at a 45. We're gonna screw it in place and simply just put it up on the wall. And this is gonna be a nice place to display them. Again, like I said, up out of the reach of children. And of course, you know, these are one of those projects where I was inspired. And I was inspired by a certain maker, you guys know him, named Jimmy Diresta. And to pay homage to that, let's go ahead and mount some of the things that he does as well. I think this wall definitely is not just functional, but artistic as well. Hey guys, thanks for joining me for this video. I do want to say a couple things. This video was inspired by a gentleman by the name of Jimmy Diresta. If you don't know Jimmy and you know me, then there's probably a problem. I'm gonna link Jimmy's channel down below. My first iteration of this, when I saw him make these, had a bit of an accident. I'm not sure if you can see that, I think you can. There's I'm gonna show you a picture. The first mold I made, the blades were held in place with a little piece of birch. There was 2 of them. I was gonna cut them in half, make 2 knives, and I did that. But during that process, I dropped 2 razor blades down into the resin mold. And so when I cut them on the bandsaw, saw a few sparks, I actually forgotten that I had dropped them in there. Crazy enough as that sounds. But when I saw the sparks, I backed it off and finished it off with an angle grinder. And then, still made do. Pretty awesome stuff. Also, Jimmy got a lot of flack a little bit. I say a lot. Jimmy got a little bit of flack. Most of his comments are, overwhelmingly positive because the guy's an inspiration to so many of us. But there was some flack that's saying that these aren't disposable. There's another side to this that you buried in the resin. And come on, really? These things are so ubiquitous around the shop. They dull it up and you can sharpen them. I actually had a viewer reach out to me telling me he sharpens his utility blades on, a piece of MDF mounted on the lathe. He made some type of contraption for it with some polishing compound. Says he gets them wicked sharp, like sharper than they are when they come out of the packaging. Anyway, these things are really cheap. And also, Jimmy's carbon footprint is not that large because that guy reuses and restores almost anything. And also, the inspiration drawn from this, so cool. Even when they get dull, maybe you don't want to sharpen them, you can do what I did. You can mount them on the wall. It could be a cool conversation piece. Also, speaking of which, they're pretty cool. They're nice. They're artistic and they look good. And I actually did a video on my second channel where, I asked the question, do you guys put art in your shops? Again, I don't think that kind of video is really relevant to this channel. We do builds here, we make things. However, it is on the second channel. If you want to check that out, subscribe there. A little bit different feel. And I'm also going on a really interesting journey called Make a Better Maker, how to build a better maker. You want to check that out? That's all down below as well. Guys, thank you so much for joining me. I want to thank Total Boat for supplying the resin and thank Jimmy for the inspiration as well. My name is Chris. I'll see you guys on that next project. Until then, get out there, get in the shops, make something. Don't care what it is, how you do it. It's so much fun. I think we all can agree. Y'all have a great day. I'll see you on the next video.